All right, Emily, we were just chatting before we hit record here about how crazy things are on this planet right now. So what are you feeling? What's going on with you right now?
Oh gosh. That might take a couple hours, but in brief, not even the latest mass shooting, but the one that happened yesterday in Highland Park, Illinois, during the 4th of July parade,
Yeah.
was right in my backyard where I grew up. The shooter was on top of a restaurant that I've eaten at probably 1,000 times, literally, in my life. So had to spend my holiday checking in with loved ones and family and friends of friends. And um, on the heels of the everything the Supreme Court is doing, but especially for me, the Dobbs decision,
Hmm.
it just feels like a lot. I feel tired. Yeah, that's my honest answer. I feel tired.
Yeah. Do you feel like a lot of people feel tired, like generally, like that most people are fairly fed up and just exhausted by everything that's happening?
Yeah, I do. I talk to a lot of people, friends, loved ones. I work on a social justice committee through my synagogue, and a lot of people seem to feel paralyzed, I think, as well as tired, where the desire to help and make change and save lives is real. And so many people, there are just so many fires going on at once that people feel kind of paralyzed. Where do I put my efforts? What do I do? Who do I help? And it's exhausting.
Feels like that there is a pretty strong consensus of people just fed up with all this. But how does that square with what seems to be a lack of listening to what the general public wants versus what the policies and laws are currently?
Honestly, that's part of the source of my exhaustion is it is so unbelievably frustrating that I mean, there's so much research, so much of our country wants common sense gun laws. So much of our country wants women to have the right to choose. And so it's how do we bridge that gap? It's how do we make our voices heard? And the obvious answer is vote. But I live in Texas, and we have some of the worst voter suppression, or maybe the worst voter
Yeah.
suppression in the country. And they don't make it easy. They make it really hard on purpose. The upcoming election is supposed to be, I think, the most difficult. Our ballot, we have new machines. Our ballot is several pages long. You can't vote straight ticket anymore. It's not on a holiday, obviously. They're putting more restrictions on voting by mail. So it's really hard to know where to turn and to bridge that gap. It seems like a minority of our legislators are really turning things on their head.
Yeah, it does seem like that. And kind of keeping in line with this, with your book, and it's very interesting that Deb approached me about chatting with you. And what an interesting time in talking about abortion. And then your book, which is a very large central theme to that, especially as soon as you get into the book about that. What are your feelings as this book and then what's happening with abortion? Like crazy. Like,
Yeah, the timing feels, not to get too woo woo, but it feels kind of like it was maybe meant to be
mm,
because I started this book in early 2011. I started taking notes and jotting things down, and was working. Was my first child was 6 months old, so it was definitely a slow process writing this
yeah.
book. But in 2010, when I started writing it, I could never have imagined that the book would actually come out after, in a post Roe world. That was nowhere in my mind. What I had hoped to do was normalize some of the conversation around abortion because I noticed I carried a lot of shame about my own that I don't think I was even aware of. until I did some therapy. And when I started finding the courage to talk about my own abortion with friends, um, I would hear so often, I haven't told anyone, but I had one also, or I had two.
Yeah.
Or so I really wanted to have it be a part of the book, but not the whole book, because I think that's a more realistic portrayal of how abortion fits into women's lives. It's just one part of our lives. So many of us have them. It's a part of healthcare. It's sad. It's hard. No one goes into it lightly. It's a very unpleasant medical procedure. It used to be safe and legal, but definitely unpleasant, difficult emotionally. But it's one part of our lives, and then we have multifaceted lives. And I wanted women to be able to see that represented in fiction, which when I started to shop this book, I was really surprised to see it's not represented in fiction. And I think that my novel in 2022, it's the only one I'm aware of in which the protagonist has an abortion. So,
Right.
not a side character whose life is going down the toilet,
Right.
not the main character who then at the last minute decides not to have the abortion and keep the baby, and it's the best thing she ever did. So, yeah, I really just wanted to write something that I felt reflected women's lived experiences in fiction, but I never imagined that it would be so controversial or come at such a strange time.
What I found also interesting was when you're talking about your abortion and then your work with your synagogue.
Hmm.
I wonder if when people hear that, do they think, is this, these two things are colliding? And
Yeah,
what are the feelings and thoughts between these two these two entities or places, or one an abortion, but then in how people feel religiously and a lot of different sects and faiths about that. Talk a little bit about that, because I think people hear that, they're like, okay, wait a minute, what's going on here?
I get that. Actually, in Judaism, and this may come up in the courts because we have the freedom to practice our religion, right? And in Judaism, women, when the life of the mother is in danger, Jewish law actually requires them to terminate the pregnancy.
Mm,
So that's one way they intersect that people might not be aware of. But happily for me, I don't think I could be part of a religion that didn't respect a woman's bodily autonomy.
for
There's a
sure.
long tradition of, and there are different kind of grades of Judaism, for lack of a better word.
Sure.
I'm a Reform Jew, there are conservative Jews, there are Orthodox Jews, but actually the requirement, my understanding at least, is that throughout all of Judaism, women are required to terminate pregnancies that could threaten their own lives. So my it does sound like, oh, a house of worship and social justice work and pro-choice advocacy might collide, but actually that I've learned through the synagogue is largely a fiction. I attended a wonderful conference for the synagogue with an organization. The acronym is sacred. I'm not going to get all the words that the
Yeah.
letters stand for, right? But I learned a great deal because there were various sects of Christianity, Judaism. There might be a couple other religions that were represented, not Catholicism. I don't believe Islam was represented, but there were ministers and pastors and rabbis all talking about how they, in their churches and synagogues and houses of worship, for many generations, they'd all been pro-choice.
Yeah.
And this kind of fiction by the right wing fundamentalist Christian group really glommed onto the um, anti-abortion line, which has caught hold of a lot of people. But the vast majority of faiths, including most sects of Christianity, are supportive of women's right to choose. So it sounds like they might clash, but my rabbi, who I do this work most closely with, is a very outspoken
Yeah.
reproductive justice rabbi. So there are a lot of faith leaders who work in this space.
One reason I wanted to talk about that is I think it's really important. I feel very similar to you about that with faith, but I think my observation is that kind of the general population doesn't know that. What
Right.
they see and hear is what is the large minority, the
Yep.
squeaky wheel, if you will,
Yep.
that is somehow in a weird, crazy way of just latched onto this. So my question is, why is this become such a large topic for right-wing conservative evangelicalism? When we see the opposite of probably what's more mainstream in
Mm-hmm.
DC.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great question. I'm probably not the right person to really answer it the best. I think a historian, a religious historian,
Mm-hmm.
might give us both an answer that would knock our socks off. But I think at the root, I mean, my layperson's understanding and take on it is that this is a way to control women and it's about holding on to power. And it
Yeah,
sure seems like white Anglo-Saxon Christian men are feeling threatened.
yeah,
I think they're feeling left behind and sort of see what's coming, that people of color now can achieve all kinds of things based on merit, that
yeah.
women can decide not to have children or can decide to have children and can go in a bunch of different directions. And unfortunately, it seems that a lot of people, um, again, the minority, but a lot of loud people, including a loud minority of our politicians, are just really looking for ways to control women's bodies. Obviously, if we can't decide if and when we're going to have babies or if we're going to be able to survive
Yeah.
miscarriages, ectopic pregnancies, uterine infections, then our choices and our upward mobility and our ability to pursue our passions and our soul's calling is seriously limited. So I think it just boils down to power.
Doesn't it always?
Doesn't
Power, money. It's
power?
always like
Yeah.
follow
Exactly.
the money, follow
Yep.
the power. It's this whole thing that we have like as humans is this thing, this desire to like have relevance,
Yeah.
like being relevant. Like nobody wants to feel obscure and feel
Right.
like they don't matter.
Yep.
And I always think like with anything, whenever there's a shift happening somewhere where the power player is starting to become the lesser, that's when it gets dangerous because nobody wants to relinquish power, even when it may be inevitable. I think it's inevitable. I really do. Whenever that is in the future, I don't know. I may not be around for it, but you're going to go through nastiness when that happens because no one likes to relinquish power in anything.
That's right. That just gave me like little goosebumps because I feel the same way. I feel like it's inevitable. And I feel like that is why some of these politicians are doing such outrageous things. It's almost like
Yeah.
they're cornered. And so they're
Yeah.
just like doing anything they can. And I don't know if I'll be here either, but I know that I have to um, try to in my little corner of the world, I guess, write and share women's stories.
Yeah.
But I think you hit the nail on the head. Yep.
I just, I actually think this, I really, when I talk on my podcast, I don't hold anything back. I try to, I'm not crazy about stuff, but I just try to be like intelligent and be like, hey, I think the reality of these situations is that the country, I think in general, the people are more progressive, are moving forward. Everything from our technology to our mindsets to how we treat people, and we're becoming alive on that.
Mm-hmm.
I think we really are. It's just that if you're paying attention to a lot of what's out there and news feeds and algorithms, it makes you think that's not the case. But I don't think that's true at all.
Yep. I agree with you, and I think you just hit on another really important kind of um, divergence is where we have conversations with the people we know
Mhm.
and care about, and everyone seems pretty reasonable.
I know.
And then you've got all the different news. I really haven't watched much news since
Mhm.
election night 2016 because
Yeah.
I just kind of can't
Yeah. I
handle
was the
it.
same way. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's been really interesting because I find that the things I need to know about always find their way to me, but I
Mhm.
don't need to have 24-hour cable news
Yeah.
on to get it. And that sort of keeps me in a state of like mild fight or flight all the time,
Yeah.
which is just not great. So
Yeah.
yeah, I get that.
What was interesting, I feel like, and connected to this was also like in your book, like the main character. And I thought it was funny. Like,
Yeah,
like how the character speaks
good.
and in the shit smithereens and all this. It's like the wittiness, the funniness in the face of difficult times, which feels like it mirrors kind of our societies. Like we have to find some level of goodness and joy even in the face of really difficult things. Tell me a little bit like why you wrote it
Yeah.
in this voice, because it was very different than a lot of books I read.
Um, well, first, I'm glad you found it funny, and I'm glad you weren't offended by the shit smithereens.
No, I laughed out loud a lot actually.
I got a lot of pushback on like literally I got a comment from my editor that was like too much poop. I'm just like
No, come on.
um but really I wrote it. I didn't have I know some writers are just always right on task and they know exactly what they want to do and the message they want to send.
Yeah.
My writing process is way messier than that. It's more like life and I guess the way I think. I um I had found the period my 20s and early 30s and many of the people I cared about, the women I care about, I found that time to be, as a dear friend of mine says, a real gong show. And I didn't really see that. I've always been an avid reader. I love reading. And I love fiction. And even the fiction I love the most, even if it tackles hard topics, and I always like my fiction to tackle something that's going to make me think, show me a new perspective. But if it's just a slog to get through,
Yeah.
I it's like, can you be kind to your reader too? Like I'm really glad I know about like this horrible sex trade in India, but my goodness, like this is traumatizing to read. Can we find some joyful arc somewhere? So, and I think that that's also life. I mean, that's how I've gotten through all of the hard things in my life is found ways to laugh and find humor and find the absurdity. So, anyway, I wanted to represent that time and kind of unpack my own feelings about that time. I think they're painted for women, at least white professional women, which I can speak to, as this like wonderful time where you meet your partner for life and everything just kind of falls into place. And instead, I think it's a really confusing time, and there's a lot of bad sex out there. There's confusing sex. There's coercive sex. There's dating where you just feel icky when you're on the date and you can't quite pinpoint why until you talk to a friend later and you're
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, that was kind of shitty. Like that's why I felt that way. And I just wanted to kind of get that down on paper. My first draft was 10 gajillion pages long. And then I sort of found the message from there. And I wanted to just represent that time period. And sure, it was fiction, and you have fun with fiction. So some of it is a little, blown up. Like, I don't think everyone gets married where there's a funeral happening in the same event space at
Right.
the same time. But I just wanted to get those feelings and those experiences down and definitely normalize the conversation around abortion, but also these other things about trying to make it in professions that maybe are male dominated,
Yeah.
and all these expectations that we're supposed to find a partner, we're supposed to choose motherhood, that and all of these things that seem prescribed for us that we don't even
Hmm.
notice. That I wanted my main character Zoe to get a little bit of a lesson in. Maybe I don't have to choose these things, and maybe my life is actually pretty good, even if it doesn't check all these boxes.
Yeah. I loved all the themes, and especially women choosing to or not to choose to have children. I think it's a powerful theme. Uh, It's like part of the whole awakening to me that's happening. Like now I know so many women who do not have children, who've actively chosen not to do it.
Yep.
Now, this was
Yeah.
a foreign concept when I was growing up in the
Totally.
80s. It was not a thing. This
Yep.
person was a leper. They were like, what's wrong with you? Type
Yep.
of thing. But it mirrors so many other things in our society where we were kind of asleep about this. And I think, honestly, I really believe this. I really think that kind of women's movements of becoming more empowered, having more choice, is threatening to a lot of men. It's
Oh yeah.
threatening to men. And they like for me, I've always been like, as a minority, I'm like, women are a minority, like me. I always see it like that. But I think for the people with the power structure, people hate when someone else starts to realize that they can do other things. That
Yeah.
scares people a lot. I think it's amazing. I really do. I think men are threatened by women too, because women can do so many things that men can't. That also threatens men. I think, there's a lot of ego in guys, like,
I mean, there's a lot of ego in all of us, but
yeah,
guys, yeah, I think have been used to this pattern. Oh, yeah, I am just lockstep with everything you just
yeah,
said. I agree completely. And a woman who decides not to have children and can maybe stay at work later with the guys or attend
yeah,
the happy hours or the golf games or whatever, or change it all and do other things and have
yeah,
have the workday be structured in different ways. I think it is really threatening because I think men have counted on. I'm a recovering lawyer. So in that world, there was certainly an expectation like, we're going to check the box, we're going to hire
yeah,
a bunch of women, but we know that most of you are going to step back and let us
yeah,
take the partnerships and the big money and the big cases because you have to juggle your kids at home.
yeah.
Yep.
I think this is they're big issues, but I think you're lining up all these issues. What you're seeing, I think, in America and particularly, is a lot of sectors and industries and personal decisions. People are awakening. The monster is awoken.
Yep.
And it's all happening like it's like parades. It's like fireworks are just boom, boom, boom. Women, racism, work life, like all these things are just cascading effect. And for the ruling power, they're like, wait, they should not be like this. Stay
Mm-hmm.
subservient. Like
Right.
it's a mental overthrow, a coup that is happening mentally. And then, but they know what comes next after the mental part. And so there's all this shifting, these tectonic plates, of life happening right now. And that's what we're all living in, which is crazy right now.
It is a lot, but I love that you use the term awakening because even when I'm feeling really pretty desolate about things and despairing, I in my gut I feel that. I feel that it's an awakening, and
Mhm.
awakenings are not easy. They're not
No.
tidy. They're not orderly. And it was so weird because when this shooting happened, and it wasn't even the most recent. I mean, then a few hours
Right.
later, there's one in Philadelphia. It's
Mhm.
just kind of unbelievable, truly unbelievable.
It is.
But for some reason, and now that you're speaking and I'm listening, I think I know why. I was thinking back to when these bathroom bills came out,
Mm.
and I think Texas was either the first or second. It was either one of the Carolinas was first, and then Texas.
Yes.
But I remember thinking, like, what? You know, what? And I knew that people who identify as trans are such a small percentage of the
Right.
population. Like, who gives a crap where they go to the bathroom? Why am
Yeah.
I spending tax dollars on this? But as you so eloquently said, it's all related. I
All
mean,
related.
the racism, the transphobia, the homophobia, the misogyny, the bigotry, it's just all out there. Because I think, right, the people who hold the power feel really cornered,
Yeah.
but there's no stopping this now.
No, I think the hope you can take is that while it may be nasty and it feels overwhelming, is that you can't think about it. Well, I want to see it change. Yes, it'd be great for you to see it change, but the reality is it may be a while beyond your lifetime.
Right.
But I think to take comfort in that it's going to change.
Yeah.
Like it is, humans have this fundamental need to progress forward.
Yeah.
It's just in us. We're not going to be like in creating, just create the wheel and stop there, or start, creating gas powered cars and go, oh, that's it. Like, and this is the same thing. It's just a more hot button issue. It's going to move forward. It's just so incredibly disappointing during the change part of it. And I think your book kind of highlights even about relationships. We're struggling. That's what I like about doing my podcast. And I get to talk about a lot of relationship stuff with dating coaches and people who develop apps. We're in a massive struggle in relationship culture right now.
Oh, goodness.
I would love for you to talk about that in relation to your book.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, again, sadly, I didn't have to dig too deep. I mean, the characters themselves are fictionalized, but what they represent was really easy to call on from my own experiences, from friends' experiences. It is so rough out there, and you're inundated with possibilities. And when you reference growing up in the 80s, so did I. And yeah, that was the idea. Is I remember being a kid, if there was a single woman who, and my parents had some single woman friends, the question was, what happened? Were they married? Did their husband die?
Yeah.
And never a wife, a husband, did their husband die?
Yeah, it can't be a single dude. I mean,
it's just, and it can't be a lesbian. I mean, it was just like, what happened to her? And there was always some story, or theory about why that person was single.
Yeah.
But in any event, so I certainly got out of school thinking that I was an independent, intelligent woman. I had graduated from Harvard Law School, and I had all of this shit in me, just like everybody else, where I thought, this is the time I'm supposed to get married. I'm supposed to have children before I'm 30. My eggs will all dry up and evaporate on my 30th birthday, just like Cinderella, like a pumpkin.
Yeah.
And it's always there. And it's kind of this underlying queasiness. At least it was in me. It wasn't a lot of my friends.
Yeah.
And so then you have apps. Then it was mostly online. Like you actually had to, it wasn't on my phone, thank God.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your computer, and you're weeding through all these people, and this might not be fair, but it certainly seemed like amongst my friend group, there were a lot of guys who would throw themselves into the dating pool as soon as they had had some trauma, a divorce, a breakup, something, not having processed it at all. And that's not all their fault either, because I don't think men tend, again, a total generalization, but tend to be socialized to say, like, hey, I'm going to go talk to some buddies about what I'm really feeling. And I'm really falling apart, and I feel lost. I feel broken. I think women have more space to do that, or I certainly did it. Friends of mine certainly did it. We did it together. But it was really frustrating to do that work on myself and then jump into dating these men who were going to try to work through their baggage with
Yeah.
me. So, and then, there's always the safety element. Uh, it's a little daunting to maybe go back to your apartment with someone who you don't know all that well
Right.
and it's bigger than you are, and you're taking a chance and you're doing all the things, and your friends tell you to text them when you get home safe and all that good stuff,
Yeah.
but it's just a lot. So I wanted to capture that and the frustration, and I wanted to also capture what a lot of women feel, I think, which is, um, I felt at least that it was so unfair that my biological clock was ticking. So I felt like I don't have, a year to be yanked around by some guy. Like,
Yeah.
I'm looking for something, and guys could be like, I can wait till whenever I want. So I
Sure.
wanted to sort of, right. So I wanted to kind of capture as much of that as I could in characters that were enjoyable and would bring some laughs along with
Yeah. You definitely captured it. It's just it's just funny. Like, but it also just it's a wave. That book, your book is a wave to me. It's a tsunami of like, this is what's happening, this is what's coming. It's going to reach landfall, and it's going to be messy, but there is some joy in it. And I think the dating culture is just I keep going back to this. It's just another iteration of the change that humans are going through. And it's
for sure.
messy because
Yeah.
right now it's based, I mean, I've been married for 18 years and it's awesome. I can't even imagine dating now. It's going to be insane.
Right.
But now it almost functions, from what I can gather and the guests I've interviewed, like a slot machine. And it's like, just keep pulling. Even if
Yeah.
you think something's good, keep pulling the slot machines that may hit the lottery. Even if you've already kind of hit the lottery, no. Keep trying to hit the lottery.
Yes.
So we're trying to figure this out. Like, and it's, again, it's right now, the humans who are living now are doing this is super messy. It's super messy.
It's super messy. And then the slot machine, oh gosh, that's another one that gave me goosebumps. What a great analogy, because what the other thing I tried to capture in the book is, I think for women especially, when all you want to do is walk away from that slot machine and just
Yeah.
take some space and get in touch with what you really want and need, there's all this pressure like, no, if you walk away from the slot machine, your jackpot could pass you by. Screwed,
You're
You're
gonna miss Prince Charming or whatever you would say in the past, you know?
right. And the messiness in the dating coaches, I love that there are dating coaches now. And
Yeah.
I am quite confident that the good ones and the ones you've spoken to um, help take away some of the shame. There's just so much shame in that period of life.
Yeah.
At least there was for me and many of my friends, because you do so many humiliating things. I mean, dating is hard. You say stupid shit, you're
Yes.
getting stuck in your teeth. Like,
Yeah.
you're like, I wanted to get this one. I think I may have done it in a footnote in the book, but I'm like, why does no one talk about this? If you're naked from the waist up, but you have jeans cutting into your belly, and you're sitting there thinking like, oh my gosh, I probably have love handles, right? I mean, there's just so much awkward, horrible stuff. And I wanted to actually write about it to normalize it and
Yeah.
to say, like, all of you who think you're the only ones who've totally bumbled through this and are carrying this around secretly, all of us, every single
Yeah.
one of us has done some of this stuff and felt absolutely ridiculous. And I
Yes.
think, yeah, that's part of it.
Your book just does such a great job of normalizing the messiness on something like, and it's like, okay, it's okay to feel this way. And
Right.
then I love the U2 connection, which was really actually one of the reasons I was really into this superficially initially. I'll be honest with you, because
I love that.
it's a very superficial reason, because I love U2. And that's funny. It sounded weird the way I said, I love you too. You know,
Yep.
but my wife was a huge fan when I met her, huge YouTube fan,
Really?
gigantic, all the CDs back in the day. Okay, CDs.
Yep.
And I was always a massive fan of the band. And I just love how the character writes to you too. And the band, it's just like, it was just different. I was like, this book has like a different element to it. Like most books, I'm really bored of. I'll be honest with you. Like, I'm really bored by them. Like, I'm not an avid reader.
Fair.
So if somebody sends me a book, it better be good, man. Because I'm tuning out within 20 pages. I'm like, eh. And I thought, I laughed out loud. And my wife was like, what are you laughing at? I was like, this book's funny. And she was like, you never laugh at books. I'm like, yeah, but this is funny. I'm like, that doesn't happen to me. So kudos to you.
That makes me feel so good. And now I totally want to meet your wife. She's my
Oh, massive fan. I mean, and I had only really listened to Joshua Tree, honestly, but like she has listened to everything, Actung Baby, Pop, the whole thing. So she made me listen to every single album, type of thing, and it just made me deeper be into the band, and I just thought it was a great connection, you know.
Oh, I'm so glad you enjoyed it. Thank you. I've always been a huge fan, and I knew they were going to be a part of this book somehow. And they sort of represent this like perfection. I mean, they've been friends for
Yeah,
more than 40 years. They split their earnings equally. They always have from the beginning, and they put each other first before the band. And then, of course, in their music, they explore a lot of these themes, or life themes. Obviously, they're
yeah,
not coming at it quite from the perspective I am, but they do it in music that I love to listen to, but it actually explores some pretty heavy
it
themes.
does. Yeah,
And my husband just said one day, he's like, what if Zoe wrote, instead of just her regular diary, what if she addressed each diary entry to the band members? And as soon as he said it, I was like, yes, that's what I'm
yes,
going to do.
yes,
So, yeah, and got the lyrics in there. And it just felt authentic to me because they're always, all of the messiness, I've always gone to their albums to sort of help me feel it,
yeah.
process it.
I mean, think about like, I mean, some heavy stuff like, you know, Sunday, Bloody Sunday, Bullet
Mhm.
the Blue Sky. I mean, all these songs, it's just like almost revolution and pain and
Mhm.
suffering. Um, and it just always just pulled me. Every time I was like, man, this is like just amazing. So I
Yeah.
was like, really, like when I saw it, I was like, yeah, I'm going to be talking to Emily.
Oh, that's, oh, I love that.
If
Yeah.
nothing else for that reason, man. You know, it's like it's such a cool thing, you know. It just made me remember like meeting my wife and how like over the moon she was about that band.
Yeah.
And then it pulled me in, and then and it's just life is interesting that way, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, some of their early songs even that sound really like poppy and they're kind of coming out
Yeah,
of 70s punk. Um, it's about some really serious shit,
it
like
is.
Bono losing his mom and
Mm-hmm.
some of these things that sound like, guy looking for the girl. It's like, no, it's a guy looking for God or guy looking
Yeah,
for
yeah,
his mother who died. And
yeah,
um, yeah, they speak to me too, obviously.
yeah,
So
yeah. It's a big
I love
part
that
of it.
we share that. That's so cool.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, I remember my wife was like, "You got to listen to this song, Miami." I think it's from the Pop album or something. She's like, "It
It's
just
from
feels like
Pop.
you're in. It feels like you're in Miami, the way it
Yeah.
comes on and stuff."
Yep.
And so, like, I delve in pretty hardcore with that band, like making the music and stuff, like understanding how, like, the songs are made. Obviously, a lot of people are very familiar with like Where the Streets Have No Name, but
Yep.
I wanted to know how that was made
I
because
love
there's nothing
that.
like that very tiny sound that starts and then it builds.
Mhm.
And then it always made me think of a revolution. That's
Yeah.
something that the change, and I mirror that with what's happening now. It's a tiny sound at first, but it's becoming a roar. That's
Yeah.
what's happening right now. It was a
Yeah.
tiny sound. It was a bathroom thing,
It,
then it's just bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's ugly when it becomes a tidal wave. It just gets real ugly. And
yep.
it's just all
Everything.
metaphors for that.
Yes, everything comes back to you too. And I love that you bring up that you wanted to know their music making
Mm-hmm.
process, because then you probably know they always talk about how they have the messiest, longest, kind of most painful process of making
Yeah.
music. And the
Yep.
people who work with them have to kind of,
Yep.
buckle in to just ride it out.
Right.
And where the streets have no name, that's this iconic song, and they play it at every concert, almost didn't get made
Yep.
because it was so hard to have that opening crescendo, and they changed time signatures, I think.
Yep.
And so that's one of the stories they tell for you two nerds like us that we know is their producer was really close to just erasing the track. And it's like,
Yeah.
we've been spending way too much time. We got to ditch this. And they stayed with it. And you're right. What a great metaphor for life. And sometimes something great is just really painful and
Painful.
messy and unpredictable to walk through first before you get that nugget of greatness.
In fact, I'm not sure most things that are great are just like easy. I think most of it's really difficult, whether it's an athletic endeavor, a project you go on, anything that's like truly like a beautiful work of art. There's a labor of love. There is so much time where nothing is being broadcast to the world for
Yep.
that. I think like how long it took you to write your book, right? I mean, how many days were you working on this and nights and times? And you're like, is this ever going to happen? Like, right? Nobody heard anything about it. Just you and that paper and the pen or computer, or whatever.
Yep.
That's the
I
real story. That's actually the real story.
That's a real story. And it's always so comforting to me when artists that I look up to, whether they're musicians or writers or painters, my brother's a painter, so I see this in his
Oh,
work
of
too,
course.
where you're working and no one knows about it and no one knows how much you're wrestling with it.
Yeah.
But although I so wish that some of this great stuff would just sort of pop into my lap, that was not the process with this book. And I was totally naive. I didn't realize, and my literary agent didn't realize either, that shopping this book, and I'll never forget it. She told me, she said, I don't want to say anything because the book business is so unpredictable, but I've been doing this for 20 years. I think we're going to sell this really fast.
Mm.
I was on vacation at the time. She said, keep your cell phone with you because I think it's going to sell fast. I'm going to put it out on submission tomorrow. Well, no one really wanted a book that opened with an abortion, the
Yeah.
protagonist abortion. So I really did have to dig in and throw myself behind it to get it out there. It's such a labor of love. So I'll try to take comfort in that and think that if Where the Streets Have No Name is a labor of love, then
Most
maybe I'm in
definitely.
good company. Yeah.
I think so. But I think also, on another sense, we're trying to also kind of get out of that labor of love too. On some level, we're trying to teach people like quick fixes all the time. But I don't like this, by the way. Just get rich quick, get me things fast, this Uberization of life. And
Mm-hmm.
no matter how much convenience you give people, there's still a lot of things that have to be done in a procedural way. They
Yep.
take time. And I think
Yes.
we're colliding that right now. So we want everything to be comfortable and quick. It's like DoorDash me, man. Hit me with the
Yes.
DoorDash.
Yep.
But life's not a dash like that. It's not,
Yeah. Right.
you know?
All life does not boil down to productivity and all the time. There has to be rest and digest. That's a real challenge in being. I have two boys who are 12 and 9.5.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a real challenge parenting because there are so many expectations and other parents with kids who, okay, we're going to go all in on this activity. And if it doesn't happen right away, we're going to quit that and we're going to go to something else. And
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
or, hey, here's a crazy idea. Maybe you take the summer off and fart around and ride your bike and
Yeah.
chill out. And other parents will be like, what? They're not booked solid with Lego camp and coding camp and
No,
every week. And I'm like, no. And I think we'll be okay.
you're
Yeah.
gonna survive. My
Um,
daughter is 10, almost 11, and we were doing summer camps and stuff last year, and we just got rid of all that this summer. And she's just like playing with her friends outside, or they go to the pool together here and there. These little kind of mini kid dates, and stuff like that, where they just kind of like smash together and say
yeah.
whatever and do these things. It's just so much better, I
So much
think,
better.
you
Oh,
know?
way to go. Good.
Yeah,
Yeah, I hope you and your wife high five. I mean, that's some I think that's great parenting, but it does make it harder, doesn't it?
it does
When
make it harder. But
ex-
I'm all about that though. I've never been afraid of that my entire life. Maybe it's because I grew up in a military family and I saw
Mm,
my dad go through the steps of being promoted as an officer, moving up the ranks,
yeah.
and how much time, 28 years, become a full bird colonel and putting in all the time, the effort, all the moving we did. I saw that and I thought, this is, you don't get anything without taking a while to do it, being consistent. And like I approach everything in life that way. And my podcast, this is like, I don't know, 460 something episodes. People go, how do you do that many episodes? You just do it. You just keep going. And I don't worry about all that other stuff, the monetization or all that. I just book them. Boom. Deb knows, come bring it in. Boom, boom. Because I feel like if I have like 1,000 conversations with someone,
Mm-hmm.
what's that going to do to my life? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
but that's
Mm-hmm.
going to take like 5 to 10 years for me to do it.
Yes.
But
Yes.
how great is that going to impact me as a
Mm-hmm.
human? If I hear all these different perspectives, it has to change me in
Yeah.
some incredible way. I just need to take the time to do it.
Well, you have it's really apparent in your podcast. You have just a natural like resting state of curiosity. And
I
that's such a gift because then you
think
bring
so.
so many different perspectives and niches that your listeners wouldn't know about,
Yeah.
work that your listeners wouldn't know about, to all these people. So I think it's really cool.
Thank you. So is
Yeah.
there another book coming or is this like a
Yeah. So
really?
yeah, it's I have learned that's another thing I've had to try to work on my patience. It's not so easy to write a book while you're promoting a book,
Yeah.
but I do have a third of my next book written, which is really about the power of female friendships and relationships. And I think
Oh,
that that will probably be very relevant when I can finally get some quiet time and get that finished. And then I have a third book in my mind as well that's that's also about female power. I'm noticing a theme.
yeah. This is the female
Yeah.
friendship thing. Like, talk
Mhm.
to me about that. Like, I'm curious about that. Why is that such a big theme for you?
I honestly, it's really interesting. My dad's side of the family, I am like the only female. My dad has a brother. He has two sons. I have a brother who is expecting a second son, and it's just all these males. And so I don't know, that has to have something to do with it. I don't know exactly what, but I have found, I think especially during that gong show of my 20s, that there is something magic and special. And this is the one area where I feel sorry for men because I don't think they're socialized to make these kind of relationships, where I feel like my female friendships have literally saved my life so many
Yeah.
times. And um the book started, I did like the proverbial thing where I jotted it down on a cocktail napkin on an airplane. I went to this overnight camp for girls that's really old. It must be in its like 110th season, I think,
Mm-hmm.
right now. Um, Pretty different. When it started in 1912, it was a couple, a woman, a female couple, who didn't put themselves out as openly gay at that time, but it was a female couple, and it's been only girls and women, and it's very remote. It's in the North Woods of Minnesota, called Kamaji, so it's hard to get to. Um, and because it's so old, girls come from all over the country. And they opened it up for its 100th anniversary, which they had never really done before. They had never done before. And alums could fly in and spend a long weekend there. And so it took everyone a full day to get there. Unless you're from Minneapolis, it took you a full
Yeah.
day to travel there. And I just was outside with all these women, and it's very rustic, the camp. There's no electricity in the cabins, no bathroom in the cabins. So it just attracts a kind of different kind of girl, I guess.
Yeah.
And I was just listening to these amazing things that people were doing. And I thought, what a powerful place. And having that summer of female community has to have something to do with why all of these women are in community with each other and doing such special things. So my next book is about three women who meet at overnight camp from very different corners of the country, and when they're 10 years old, and how their friendships and what they find in each other save each other's lives at different points in their lives. So one character, it saves her life right when she gets to camp when she's 10, another in midlife, and another at the end of life. And yeah, I just think there's something really magic and powerful about female friendships and relationships. I think that's probably something else that threatens the power structure right now. Because if you get a bunch of busy women together, they can they can kick a lot of ass and do a lot of things. So yeah, yeah, that's the next book.
Wow. I mean, you're a very gifted writer. Seriously.
You.
Like, I just not that interested in most books. Seriously. I just find most books boring. Like, honest truth.
Yeah.
And this was like one of the first books I read where I was like, okay, I'm not gonna shut this and like leave it on a shelf. And then when I started laughing out loud, I was like, this is an uncommon thing for me to do.
Great. Well, that makes me so happy. Thank you so much for saying that. And that's really what I wanted. I wanted readers to laugh. And I think
Yeah.
especially things are so hard right now. There's something powerful about getting to laugh at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is. There's something very, and I think we're all in a kind of a mood right now that feels pretty dour. And it's, you know, hope can be hard to have in these situations, but I believe there is. And then maybe that sounds controversial when you think nothing's good is happening, but you have to have that. When you lose that, you're dead. You're
I
dead in the
totally
water,
agree.
you know?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I have it too. And I have that same feeling where I have it in the pit of my belly, this hope. And sometimes I think, like, why do I have that? The
Yeah.
world is on fire.
Yeah.
But we have to have it.
You
And
do.
if it's in our gut, we have to pay attention to it and give it air and help pass it along the best we can. And it's a little thing, but I do think that stories are a pretty important connective tissue and
Yeah.
a way to pass along hope. So, yeah, I'm hoping this book gives people hope and gives people permission to laugh and maybe shake off some of the shame that they're carrying
Yeah.
or embarrassment. I mean, I don't know about you, but sometimes I talk to women who are in their 40s, like I am, or in their 50s or 60s, and talk about the 20s, and they're just kind of like, oh, you know. Mm. And I hope there's some kind of release and like, yeah, we can do a lot of hard things and come through them. So
Yeah.
we definitely need to tap into that right now.
I think we need to tap into it. I think also, I was telling my wife this other day, I was like, no matter what you think is going to happen, it probably won't, because the future, anybody who predicts the future is wrong about the future, like
Yeah.
100% of the time. The
Yeah.
future is not something humans know
No.
100%. And it may feel like a trajectory towards one way, but there's always things that happen that you never account for, ever. I don't know what that is over the next 2 or 3 years, but I know that something is going to happen that is unaccounted for, that wasn't thought of, that will change the trajectory of what you think is going to happen. Everything that's happened in my life, I never saw coming, ever. I never saw my wife coming. I never saw my daughter coming. I mean, nothing. I never saw the life I'm living now. If you asked me 20 years ago, I'd be like, impossible.
I was
Impossible.
going to ask if you had seen the podcast coming or if that kind of.
Never.
Yeah.
That was literally, I came out of some work I was doing, and I went to the kitchen and I looked at my wife. I said, I'm going to start a podcast. I had not previously thought about it, not 1 second before. And she was like, of course you are. I was like,
I love it. So
yeah.
you are, as my husband and I would say, MFEO, meant for each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
If she's like, yeah, that sounds right.
Sounds
That's
right.
perfect. I
Yeah.
love
But I never saw it coming. All the good things in my life, all of them, I never saw them coming. And everything I predicted. I live in Washington State. When my wife and I got married, we wrote the states that we would never live in when we were like 23, 24. Washington was on that list. Washington State. We live here now. You just don't know. How can you say you know? Like,
I'm laughing because I had never been to, I can't believe I live in Texas.
exactly.
I mean, I have been there for 13 and a half years, and my family was on spring break in Florida, and someone asked, where are you from? Clearly meaning our family. And I said,
Yeah.
Chicago. And my husband's like, no, we're from Houston. And I'm like, right. Yeah. But I'm going to try to tap into something you definitely have that I do not have, which is the patience. You're like, this is going to unfold. It may
It
not
is.
happen in my lifetime. And I'm thinking like, I really want it to happen in my lifetime.
Everyone does. Oh my, everybody I talk to has the same thing. And I equate it to this thing that, like, we no longer do these like 100, 200-year projects where we say, it's okay if this lives beyond me.
Right.
I'm totally fine with that. I'm totally fine with my eternity. I don't need to have this to validate the rest of what happens beyond this lifetime for me. But I think we all want to see the change that we so badly see coming.
Mhm.
I'm just okay with it. I'm just like, listen, if I'm like a piece of the puzzle for that, I'm good with that. There's greater adventures for me beyond this time, you know? So I feel like we actually need to have projects that live beyond us. Like, I view my podcast like that. When I'm dead, this thing somebody will listen to it.
Yeah.
My daughter will hear my voice when I'm gone. Like,
Yeah.
we don't think about life enough that way, in my opinion. Like, that's the patience I think is really important, you know?
You've just given me such a gift by saying that. I really needed that perspective.
Wow.
Thank you.
Wow. Really?
Yes, 100%. I'm just like, no, every woman, I'm like, no, every woman has to have everything right now. I'm like, they have
Right.
to be safe. They have to have the right to choose. And of course, that's what we want. And we don't want anyone to suffer or be discriminated against or pushed down. And we just want to get where we're going.
Yeah.
But yeah, there has to be some satisfaction and acceptance of, this is my place in my time, and
That's
I'm going
right.
to work the way in my little corner, the way I can, and just kind of let go of the rest and have faith and hope and
Yeah.
find
Plenty
our.
of women never saw other women get the right to vote. Plenty
Yeah.
of women saw that.
Yeah.
I mean, just depends the time you're born in. You know,
Yeah.
I always think it's like, well, what are you going to do in that time? You can't travel forward. can't travel backwards. You can only live in the time you're in.
Yeah.
And you have to make peace with that, I feel like. And a lot of
Yeah.
people don't want to make peace with that. They want the change to happen now. They want it to be Uberized for them.
It
Like,
feels it feels very desperate. I mean,
yeah,
I feel like I have an easier time finding patience with, you know, I took breaks writing this book because I had children, I had job, I had life come up and I
yeah,
was okay with that. But the big things, the people who are suffering, I've always felt just desperately impatient
yeah.
about that getting better. But of course, that has not been the trajectory of the human race. So
No.
that's probably not going to happen for me. But what a gift. And I love that
That's great.
perspective because my third book is inspired by my paternal grandmother,
Mm,
who was a Russian Jew, poor. Um, and in 19, I'm very bad at math, 37, got a full scholarship to the University of Chicago, which was just kind of unheard of at the
yeah,
time. And she was apparently, we have very little of her, but have some report cards. She was apparently just really, really intelligent. And she couldn't go. She needed to work to help support her parents and siblings. And so she couldn't go to college. She died really young in her 30s of breast cancer. And I think, okay, she she was she was way ahead of her time.
yeah,
And I like to think maybe that I can help sort of bring her legacy forward and write some of her story. And um so yeah, things unfold sometimes in a different way than we plan. They take a lot longer than I would like.
always longer.
But what a great perspective. And if we can just be moving in the right direction, that's worth something.
It's
So
definitely
thank you.
worth something. Oh, no, no problem. Life's
Yeah.
just kind of like a contractor. You think they're going to get the job done in 3 months. It always takes like a year. I mean, it's just
uh,
bank on it being longer.
uh, I just needed that right now with everything going on. It
Yeah,
really does feel so desperate on so many
yeah,
levels. And it is. I mean, not to diminish it,
of course.
but I don't think, at least for me, I can't be at my best if I'm living in a state of just
No,
constant high anxiety. I need to sort of step back and realize, okay, this is a marathon, not a sprint. Sometimes I need to find time to replenish, but then
yeah,
I'll wake up the next day and keep going.
most definitely. Well,
Yeah,
Emily, I mean, I had really no expectation for this conversation because I just go in and go, see what happens.
cool.
It was awesome. I mean,
I
really, really, you're such a wonderful person. Seriously.
Thank you so much. I feel the same way about you.
Thank you.
I'm so grateful to have this chat and just really appreciate knowing you. And thank you for your work.
Thank
I'm
you.
curious too. So it's really fun to open up my app and see that I can listen to like a sex expert or
Oh,
someone
yeah.
talk about um, like physical health or the whole spectrum. So thank
Mhm.
you.
Thank you. Please tell everyone about getting your book, the whole spiel. You got to promote it.
All right, I'll do it. I do have a copy. It's going to show up
It
backwards.
is.
My 31st Year and Other Calamities by Emily Wolfe. It's available most places you buy books. So, and one thing I actually really do want to say is a portion of proceeds go to a fantastic reproductive choice organization called 73 Forward. And all of their time, money, and efforts go to making sure that everyone can have physical autonomy. So,
Beautiful.
yeah,
Wonderful. Emily, thank you so much. Emily
thank
Wolf,
you,
everyone.
Dr. D. Thank
Thank
you, Dr.
you.
D. All right,
Good night.
take care.
You too.